What do you do on Sundays?
We talk about Cate Blanchett, the acting, the costumes, the awards, but mostly the Blanchett of it all.
I'm not acting.
You think this is a love affair?
I saw you, Erica. Meeting in the middle.
This is Sundays with Cate, and I'm your host, Murtada El-Fadl. Welcome to Sundays with Cate, the podcast series about the films of Cate Blanchett. Every week, we choose a Cate Blanchett film and discuss it with a guest. For the past few weeks, we've concentrated on her later career, the few films that she made in the last 5-6 years, from Carol to A House with a Clock in Its Walls, to her current films that are now in release, Nightmare Alley and Don't Look Up. But today, in this final season of the podcast, we're going to go once more back to her early career, the years post the big breakout with Elizabeth, where the movies kind of did not connect with audiences or critics, even if she was always committed and sort of a fascinating presence on screen. So we're going back to 2003 and Joel Schumacher's Veronica Guerin. And for this conversation, I'm very happy and excited to welcome to Sundays with Cate designer and illustrator Dash Silva.
Hello.
It's nice to have you on. How are you?
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun. I'm Irish. The film's supposed to be Irish. It's complicated, but enjoyable.
Yes, that's why I wanted to talk to you. I've always wanted to have you on the podcast, but I wanted to talk to you specifically about this film because I knew you would give us that Irish unique perspective that, you know, I am so far from Ireland. I'm from Sudan, which is very far from Ireland. I live in America, also far from Ireland. So I don't think I have a lot to add there. But first, before we delve into Veronica Guerin and the Irishness of it, I wanted to ask you about Cate Blanchett. What do you think of when you think of Cate? What's your impression of her screen persona?
I was trying to think of something interesting to say about this, like that was a bit unique, but I couldn't think of anything. But the best thing I thought was that like there was a period about 5 years ago, where I suddenly realized, oh, she's the best actress of her generation. Like I kind of always taken her a bit for granted. And then I realized, oh, no, she can do anything. She can be in anything. And she's one of the best contemporary examples I have for talking about someone who has range, as in not just doing accents, wigs and stuff, but as in, for me, range is not so much that they become characters, that they can be dropped into any genre and work. Like Cate Blanchett can do period stuff, she can do comedy, she can do dramatic, she can even do like comic book genre sci-fi stuff, and like she's good in all of them. Where, for example, let's say Sigourney Weaver, someone who I also love, she could never do a period movie. Like she reads as too modern, you know. Yeah, so so generally when I see Cate Blanchett in a movie, it's like, oh, this is gonna be great. You're gonna be great. Even if the movie's not great, you'll be great.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, sort of that her range sort of clicked for people, and they started to talk about her range in 2008, where she played Bob Dylan and Queen Elizabeth within the same months. I think both movies were released in October, November. And so everybody was just that year was talking about her range. She can do Elizabeth and Bob Dylan. But I always, you know, I sort of, as listeners of this podcast know, I saw her in Elizabeth in 1998. And that was just like, you know, I was a young, impressionable gay man. And I was flabbergasted by that.
It's a pretty fabulous film.
Yeah.
Did you know that like Elizabeth I is the single like role, but specifically like historical figure that's being portrayed by the greatest number of Oscar-winning actresses? And it's like such a thing to like cut your teeth because there's not many great roles for women in history. So they all inevitably, like Emma Thompson, Vanessa Redgrave, Glenda Jackson, Helen Mirren, Cate Blanchett,
Betty
Davis. Yeah. And there's one more in there. Can't recall, but
James McAvoy's former wife, what's her name? Who is in Notes on a Scandal.
Anne-Marie Duff, and her Elizabeth is so good. I think it's the best one. But she hasn't won an Oscar.
Yes. I didn't know Emma Thompson did Elizabeth. That is news to me.
It's very pedantic. She plays Queen Elizabeth I in like a Christmas special of a comedy of a sitcom. Like, but she's in it, like, and she does do it. But like, yeah.
And then, of course, more recently, the most recent one is Margot Robbie in that forgettable movie, Mary Queen of Scots.
But Margot's likely to win at some point, so she's likely going to be added to the list.
Yes, absolutely. And listeners, if you don't know, Dash knows a lot about Oscar and actresses, and you wrote a book, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm in the middle of redrafting.
All right. What's your book's title?
The Big O, and it's kind of just like I'm sort of repackaging it a bit at the moment as just focusing more on just trivia and stuff in general. So like this afternoon, I spent 20 minutes just typing up every single person that's ever been nominated for an Oscar for a performance of a Tennessee Williams character who wrote the greatest number of Oscar nominated roles. 19.
Oh, wow. I mean, bringing up Tennessee Williams, Cate should have done a remake of A Streetcar because she did the play. I tell you, that was probably the best performance I've seen on stage. And I've seen a lot of theater, but she was amazing.
I'd like her to do Sweet Bird of Youth because the film for that is not great, and I like it, and it's not it's not great. But the film for A Streetcar is like it's pretty like unassailable. Like anything you do is going to be seen as like the not as good version.
Exactly, like how we're dealing with West Side Story right now. Totally.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, oh well, it was pretty flawless to begin with, like really, like aside from the usual discussions about the casting of it, but like even they don't, it's kind of like it's not the biggest problem, and it's not the worst example of it because the movie's more about like the score, the music, the choreography, at least to me. And obviously it's not like I'm white, so like I shouldn't really be commenting on it.
And she did do a little bit of Blanche in Blue Jasmine, so she kind of did her version.
Yeah, like I feel that is just Woody Allen doing A Streetcar Named Desire, and yeah, it's almost exactly it.
Yeah, and then she's 52 now, I think. So she is at that age where she will get these roles, like Sweet Bird of Youth, offered to her if she wants to take them. So I'm sure she'll get offered all these roles, whether on stage or on film.
Yeah, especially if she tries to go for like her triple crown, right? Like, because she's doing more TV work, and when did she do her Broadway debut? 4 years ago?
I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. Is The Present, which was not a great play, although she was great.
As is her way, right?
Yeah, as is her way. Yeah, and this is a good segue to what we're talking about, Veronica Guerin, because I call 1999 to 2004 her wilderness years. I think she, just reading interviews from that time, she sort of wanted to go as far away from Elizabeth as she can in sort of all the roles that she made. So she made movies like Pushing Tin and The Gift, which are sort of genre movies. And then she didn't want to do any period movies. And so she made all these movies that sort of, I think, where she learned how to be in front of the camera and became amazing in front of the camera and knew how to work, how to do her thing on film. But the movies themselves didn't really work. I think she made only one great movie at that time, which was The Talented Mr. Ripley, which
it's not her movie at all.
It's not. But I think it's one of her best performances because she at that point she just comes in and she's like a hurricane and she leaves. A very quiet hurricane. It's not.
You're completely right. Like I was thinking of what you said about the wilderness thing, and I was like looking through the films of the period, and I was trying to think what was not quite working, because it's like you look at the directors and they're all like really good. There's like Tom Twyker, Barry Levinson, Ron Howard, like people who are make reasonably good movies. Yeah, I think it's that they just didn't know what to do with her, and I think it's that when she got to work with maybe. Actually, I should have researched what she's in the years after, but like
the film she did after this is The Aviator. So 2004.
When she gets someone like a Martin Scorsese or a Todd Haynes or someone that really knows what to do with her, whereas before it's like, and also like her other ones, these are like blokey man directors. They make movies for men, like there's not a lot of interiority to her characters in these ones, I would say.
Yeah.
which is fine, but it's definitely not what she's good at.
Yeah, I can see. I think one of the movies that I think is good in that period is, but also it's Heaven with Tom Tickfer. But that I think the story is a little bit too strange, and her performance is great, but also just on a register maybe that people at that time were not used to seeing.
I mean, it was from 2002, right?
Yes, so it's a year before Veronica Guerin,
and it deals with terrorism, right?
Yes.
And it's after 9/11, right?
Exactly, yes.
I feel that unfortunately they must have gone into production at one time and the world changed whenever. And it's just, definitely like, this is a tough sell.
Yeah. Especially that it asks you, like, it's told from the point of view of the two terrorists played by her, Giovanni Ribisi.
Exactly.
So it was a tough sell at that time. And then it goes into like a little bit of like, it becomes a fable, and like, it's a strange film. But anyway, we are here to talk about Veronica Guerin, which is from 2003. It's directed by Joel Schumacher. It is about Irish journalist Veronica Guerin, who is a very well-known figure and well loved and respected in Ireland. She did these investigations into the drug trade in Dublin, which led to her murder in 1996 at the very young age of 37. So Cate plays Veronica Guerin. This is another one of her titular roles. And this movie was released just a few years after Guerin was murdered. So like it was sort of a contemporary of that story. It happened just a couple of years after. So she's a major figure in Ireland, right, Dash?
I think, I mean, I can't tell for certain. I think the movie conflates a lot of things, especially about her legacy. And I think also maybe she's more famous in death than she necessarily was alive. And and not just this movie, but the 2000 movie that they made starring Joan Allen, which is basically the same movie but fictionalized. There's a lot of mythologizing of her. Like, for instance, I thought I was looking at like old archive footage this afternoon of the national broadcaster reporting on the incident when that guy comes to her house and shoots her. And like they say like, oh, at Guerin's home where she lives, that she shares with her husband and daughter. She didn't have a daughter, she has a son. And this is, and then he says she's one of Ireland's most respected criminal reporters. So it's like the film is sort of portraying her as like something of a celebrity, in that like even the national broadcaster is screwing up on whether or not she has a son or daughter, and she only has one child. So and likewise the bit which kind of sticks in my craw a bit is the bit at the end when they're like, everyone in Ireland knew where they were when Veronica Guerin was killed. I think that's, people say they knew where they were when Kennedy was assassinated. That's the only person I've heard like that sentence attached to. And I think it's a very bold claim to say that, because
it fits with the heavy-handedness of the film. Like I thought the film sort of in general was a little heavy-handed with the subject. I mean, that fits with that.
The thing sort of to understand about like Ireland is there's not two Irelands, there's three Irelands. There's Northern Ireland and there's the Republic, and in the Republic there is Dublin and everywhere else. And Ireland is a country that has been like for the past 100 years is trying to be like move past its colonial history as, you know, part of Britain or part of the United Kingdom. And it means as a result that they really are invested in talking about themselves a lot in their press, in their media, and all sorts of stuff. So it does get a bit insular and it does get a bit self-involved. So not to diminish the horrors of like the drug trade in Dublin at the time, which were actually quite real. The movie isn't really exaggerating it that much. At the same time, it's also only affecting like a few neighborhoods, but it's being given like colossal national attention, and not especially not very sensitive attention with regards to how you know drug addiction is like a social problem. It's a lot more sort of being dismissive and damning, condescending about drug addicts rather than criminal organizations and stuff.
Yes. And I that was one of the things to sort of notice, like, especially the movie sort of starts with the investigation of Veronica Guerin. She goes into sort of these drug dens where these young teenagers, I thought the makeup was also very heavy-handed here.
Oh, God,
like they all look like they have so many bruises, and as if their skin is just...
I kept saying Dickensian, like it's just... it's awkward because I lived in Dublin. Like it doesn't look like that. Like the way that they have portrayed it is as if it is Victorian Dickensian London.
Yes.
And it's like in this period, it's during the Celtic Tiger when the economy is surging. So it's a place of extremes. There is extreme wealth and there is extreme poverty. And again, they kind of just portray the entire city like this. And this is definitely where you can see that. I think the production is largely Irish, like in the credits, every technical person. And I think it's just the money's American, and the director and the lead actress, almost all the cast are Irish.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, so it's I think they made decisions about how they wanted certain things to read. They saw Train Spotting. They wanted this sort of look, but
a very gritty sort of look. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like it doesn't quite give the right impression with regards to what's sort of going on there with it.
And I think it also just went a little maybe too far in the other direction. Like maybe they were aiming for gritty, but it became unreal. But to me, it just became like, I don't think that's how teenagers would look, who just like, I think it just went a little too much. Like they almost had open wounds on their faces. Like,
yeah. Although now, so my boyfriend's also Irish, and he's 3 years older than me, and he's actually from Dublin. But he said that like the imagery of all like the needles and stuff just carpeting the ground of like the States, that's moderately true.
Oh, okay.
I think it definitely goes a bit beyond the levels of taste when you've got the kids playing with the syringes, but that's not invention, because obviously when you talk about Joel Schumacher, the word camp is
associated with him. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like it, but I think that bit's moderately
real. And Schumacher started as a costume designer and a production and an art director. So I think sort of like sets and costumes are things that are top of mind for him always.
Yeah. You absolutely see that. Like even like Veronica's house. Looking at that archive footage I told you about today, they show the house she lived in, and I don't know the house she lived in, but you see those houses everywhere. It's a standard house, but like in the house you see in this movie is so much posher. It's like this, luxurious like farmhouse conversion with this stonework everywhere. It's very, and it's like such a silly like upgrade of production.
Yeah, I guess American filmmakers can't help themselves. Even when they're going for gritty, they have to put their main characters in these big houses and big lofts like they do in America. In movies set in New York, nobody lives in, unless you're top 1%, nobody lives in long, big spaces in New York.
Well, when we were watching it, my boyfriend and we were trying to like say, is there like a class thing going on here? Because one thing they don't go into in the movie is that before Guerin was a journalist, she ran a PR firm for about 7 years, and during that period, she was also working for a former prime minister, like in his office, in between two of his terms in the mid '80s when he was prime minister. And that guy is kind of like he's someone who like years later, tons of allegations of corruption. He's like a Nixon-esque figure, which kind of makes her like a bit like a Diane Sawyer-esque figure. But I mean, no. But the point I'm trying to say is that Veronica is like fairly privileged, despite the fact that we see like, her family don't seem that rich. She's pretty in the establishment.
She's posh as the British.
Yeah. as far as that goes, like in Ireland, I would say. And like likewise, when you see like the crime boss, like just how common he is, like just the bits like when he's serving caviar and his like wife has to underline where it comes from, just these things like going, you're just so repulsive in a really grubby little way. And
yeah. So what I sort of liked about this movie, and I sort of alluded a little bit to what I don't liked about it, was there's all this heavy-handedness, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But what I sort of liked about it, as somebody who enjoys watching Cate, like this was a very sort of complex role, or at least a role that gave her a lot of notes to play. Like she's dogged, she's focused. She is intimidated and intimidating in different scenes, depending on who she shares the screen with. So she's brave, she's frightened. She gets beaten up, which there's a lot of that. I didn't enjoy watching her get beaten up and shot at and all of that and murdered. But it is sort of like a role she's almost in every scene. There is a lot for her to do. And so from that perspective, I enjoyed watching it. I thought her performance was very sort of she managed to play all these notes and be special and mesmerizing on screen.
I kept trying to think, like, this film really does feel like a play for an Oscar, right? Not necessarily for her, but on the part of Bruckheimer especially, I think, in that, like, he's trying to, and I think the movie it's most reminded me of is Erin Brockovich, the dogged, like, woman that's in every scene, and she does so much, has so much done to her.
And this would have been just a couple of years after Erin Brockovich.
Absolutely. So that's why I'm thinking it's like, oh, it's fully trying to do this.
Yes.
And we get little bits of, like, Wordsworth and Bernstein-esque hero journalism type stuff as well, which is, it's always good to have your main character be a journalist because they're always seeking things out and going places. Like it's a successful job for, like, storytelling, right?
Yes, because you're investigating and trying to find and peeling the story like an onion. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And it always just reads as quite noble on screen. But watching her, like you said, you just enjoy watching her, and you do, I think, irrespective of the plot, whatever, I think that she does capture the quality that I think Guerin must have had for her to be able to charm her way into access with so many people legally and illegally, like you are engaged with her. I think the Roger Ebert critique that the character is just, like, nakedly self-serving is a bit glib, because I think that that's not entirely the case.
Yeah, I highlighted the Roger Ebert review in the outline and what he said, because I thought it was completely not what the movie was aiming for, nor is it what I noticed. So I was like, oh, that's a completely different interpretation. That she was, egocentric and just wanted to serve herself and become famous. And that's sort of what he liked about the film, which I'm like, what movie were you watching?
It was very, very strange. They're actually speaking of which, like, fame and stuff, there is one key thing I think I should point out. So the newspaper she works for, okay, it's called the Sunday Independent, and it's because we're doing, like, a hero journalist type story, we immediately think, All the President's Men, it's the Washington Post, it's the best of the best, the classiest. It is not. The Sunday Independent is basically a right-wing rag, and she alludes to it in the script, but, like, they're conservative, populist, anti-Sinn Féin, which is slightly understandable in the 90s, but they kind of still are today, and that today that mostly means just anti-organized left-wing.
So she's working basically for something like the Daily Mail.
I would say, like, the New York Post.
Okay.
Like, it has a bit more credit. I mean, the Post isn't very credibility, but, like, it definitely it's the second most popular paper in the country.
Yeah, the Post is very popular in New York. So yes, even though it might not be as credible, and definitely
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the Sunday version, which she specifically worked on, is, like, a little more highbrow, but even still, like, that's this is what I was saying, that, like, when they would report on things like I'm trying to think of a sensitive way of saying it, but, like communities being ravaged by drug abuse, this is the kind of paper that is reporting on it, but not in a very nuanced or sensitive way. And she's kind of aware of it, but at the same time, it's a lot. And that's sort of, I see why they didn't go into that.
Yes. Yeah, because I totally missed that. Like, I don't think that was something at all present in the film.
No.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, it's such a non-important thing, but I think it's just because, like, again, I keep saying All the President's Men, but, like, again, the Washington Post is supposed to be the premier paper in, the world, and
yes,
it's
absolutely,
the zenith of, like, journalistic integrity, but that's not what the paper she's at is with. So even when they're kind of like, oh, you could do fashion and, like, stuff, like, that's kind of a bit more what it is. Like, it's sort of not very challenging, and it's just a bit.
That's very interesting what you were saying about that. But I also want to go back a little bit to sort of like the film and its heavy-handedness. I think I really noticed this in the scene where Veronica, played by Cate, is attacked at home, and
Yes.
sort of the film just as if Joel Schumacher goes into a completely different register. The editing becomes sort of, everything slows down. It's in slow motion. So many different cuts. The editing just goes crazy. And the music also goes crazy and just becomes like hard hitting. And I think that sort of undercuts the performance itself because, she's being attacked by this man in her home and she's supposed to play frightened and scared. And I couldn't even see her face between the slow-mo and the music and all of the things that are...
The strobe.
What is happening?
I think the worst bits probably were the bits that are actually like the important plot bits. I think the best bits are the bits where it's just like, just let the actors act. So like her scenes with Ciarán Hinds I thought were really good. He was a great co-star for her because, he didn't overtake her. And like, I found his... So
Ciarán Hinds, who is currently in the Oscar hunt for Belfast, plays an informant, but who sort of misleads Veronica a little bit, and then she's always like trying to get information from him. And this is where she gets like, he really spars with her well. This is where sometimes she's scared of him, sometimes she's like trying to intimidate him. It's a very good sort of, like you said, they really played well off of each other.
Yeah, he's able to hold his own in a scene with her, but you're not in doubt of who the star of this movie is. Which is a very important thing when you're casting, right? Yeah. I did find like his interestingly art directed brothel amusing. Like that was just, it's like it's not going to look this good. That's absurd.
Yeah. But also, I kind of enjoyed that scene in the brothel where she sort of basically interrupts him mid-coitus.
Yeah.
Because
it's famous.
It's a different... Is it famous? It's a famous scene?
No, that's what the girl he's in bed with. It's like when Veronica barges in and then she's like, she's famous, she is.
Oh, that's what she said. But I thought that was completely different than everything else because most of this takes place in bars or in the street or when she's in her car or at home. And this was a completely different setting. And it just, I think, gave the movie a jolt because all of, this is a story that's noble. And I think this is the other thing that I didn't care for was this movie. Veronica is very noble, obviously, but it's sort of a very easy good versus evil narrative that doesn't allow for a lot of complexity. Like, I wish we would have had a little bit more shade of Veronica. I'm sure, like, you get it a little bit in her interactions with Ciarán Hinds, but I'm sure she was pricklier than what the script. Because if she managed to write these stories and sort of uncover these truths, she must have been somebody who is, not that noble all the time.
Yeah. And this is what I was saying, that like the movie sort of in death, it's that you can't be too critical of them, even if that means like I would like to see some human traits, like saintly journalist is not the most engaging to watch necessarily, no matter how good the actor is. It can be a bit. Whereas I kind of I'd like her just to be just a little. If there's just one or two little notes of her just being a bit twisted with like informant or something, but that's, I guess, it's sort of like asked. But I'd say a more constructive thing would be, I wish they had something to do with Brenda Fricker,
who plays her mom, Oscar winner Brenda Fricker.
Like, I understand, like, even though she's an Oscar winner, she hasn't like had an Oscar winner's career. Like she never went Hollywood per se, and she always kind of stayed in Britain and Ireland, and she never really like was interested in like fame and stuff. Yes. But still, it's and like she's mostly here because she lives in Ireland more than anything else. It's not like that she's seeking out, but it does seem like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I think maybe they were looking, I mean, Cate, this movie came out after she was in Lord of the Rings and after she's been nominated for an Oscar for Elizabeth. So she was a name, but there is sort of a feeling I'm getting that maybe they were looking for names. Because Brenda Fricker appears, she was sort of a name in Ireland, I'm assuming. And she appears at the beginning. The movie actually starts with her wishing that her daughter will lose her driver's license, so maybe she will be safer and not follow these stories to her death. And I sort of thought that she would be more of a presence if the movie started with her. But basically, that was maybe her one big scene, and then she's mainly just in the background looking worried.
Yeah, because you're kind of hoping there's going to be a bit where she goes to her mom and she's crying and she's like, "You put yourself together," and like this is the scene, right? This is why she's here. But never really. Even when she learns about her death, like I was hoping for, full devastation, like fall to the ground, shrieking, like just. But it's kind of just like resigned silence, which is
not fun to watch. Resigned silence is definitely not fun to watch.
No, like I wanted, like actually, this is probably a bit dark, but I do appreciate how much face work Cate was doing in the death scene. Like when you see, she's like, like this is a lot, which is like cool that you're showing me abject terror. This is good.
Yeah, it was hard to watch her, frankly, as somebody who loves watching her. It was hard to watch her being shot at, murdered, and beaten. There's a lot of that, and I think that scene was great. The abject terror she showed is great, but also the scene where the main drug lord whom she goes to at home beats her up, and sort of like you see that scene. Joel Schumacher was understated. Unlike the other scenes, the music was fine. There was no music, and he didn't do the crazy cutting, and he just allowed her to be beaten up for like a whole minute in front of you, and it was kind of hard to watch, but also great to watch because she was doing a lot of work, feeling scared and intimidated and just trying to run away. From a performance perspective, it was a great scene.
Yeah, I thought that scene was, obviously, whenever any scene has like intense physical violence, especially being perpetrated on a woman, it's like this could, you're sort of approaching going, does this need to be here? And I think that arguably none of those scenes ever need to be in the movie, but I think that this one was effectively done in that, like going, oh, this is brutal, and it does have important plot ramifications.
Yes.
And it doesn't linger, thankfully. And I did like that note at the end where you see the guy's horrible wife, at the door, which I thought that was just a nice addition, just to show like, oh, they're all rotten and they all know about it and they're all just vile. And
she was happy about it. Like she was happy her husband beat up Veronica.
Exactly. And I kind of thought that like you're saying, like I just wish it was a bit, you wish there was just a bit more like just color and stuff like that. That was a good bit where you're kind of going to like, oh God, yeah, just ugh.
And it sort of shows you the stakes of this investigation. Like, journalists get killed all the time while they're doing these sort of investigations. In fact, there is a note in the film at the end of how many were killed. But
I think that was very classy.
Yeah. But also this kind of shows you, like, in the field, she's doing her job and she's attacked in this, very violent, visceral way. So it raises the stakes of the whole thing.
Yeah, so, like it is effectively used, which is not a sentence I'm happy with saying, but...
So we talked about Brenda Fricker, Kieran Hines. There is also a cameo from Colin Farrell, which did they just sort of hire everybody who has a name in Ireland? It was so very funny that he just appears in one scene.
He had been in 2 Schumacher films at this point. He was in Tigerland and he was in Phone Booth. And Phone Booth came right after Minority Report, and Phone Booth was one of his first big solo leading man movies. So he kind of owes his career to Schumacher a bit. But more importantly, he's actually shooting a movie in Ireland at this time called Intermission, which was very famous in Ireland at this time. So like he is like just around. That's pretty much why he's there.
Yeah, and sort of maybe he visited Joel, and then Joel was like, do you want to just do a scene with Cate? Because basically she comes out of a bar and he's watching a football match with Eric Cantona, which is a very meta joke because Eric Cantona was in Elizabeth with Cate. And they talk about Eric Cantona for like a minute and then he's gone.
And I think he's because he's now the second most famous person in the movie. He's like listed on IMDb as like tattooed boy, like, and he's the second billing on the page. But it's so like I think there is a degree of you are sort of supposed to know who he is. And it is a cameo, but it is just a bit wacky.
Yeah, he gets a very nice close-up, right? Like he gets, Joel Schumacher loves him, obviously. He
absolutely.
And so the minute he appears, he gets this gorgeous close-up, and you just like, oh, you can't miss him. Like, even though he's incidental to the plot of the movie, to Veronica, you can't miss him.
Yeah, we get like, there's a lot of like sort of rough trade representation in this movie, lots of dangerous, unstable, but still kind of hot men. Yes.
And he's the hottest. And I didn't get at all danger from him because he was flirting with Veronica. Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is, by an Irish standpoint, anyone that is like it seems in any way working class, it is like they're dangerous, especially Dublin's inner city working class. It's like they're treated like subhuman, and it's yeah.
So Dash, I have like the $20 million question. So
Okay.
I am, as I mentioned, I'm Sudanese.
Mhm.
And as someone who speaks English as a second language, my first language
Mhm.
is Arabic, I am not always aware of the nuances in accents. Like I know when an accent is sort of far off or not
Yeah.
working, but don't always sort of distinguish between a good workable accent that sort of just passes and
Mhm.
one that's great and
Mhm.
on the spot. So what say you on Kate's Irish accent?
It is serviceable, but what I will say is
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it's a good Irish accent doesn't matter. It is a good Veronica Guerin accent because she does sound like her,
Oh, okay.
and that's an important distinction to make. I think, and like all sorts of Irish people think about this all the time, and it's that like everyone thinks I'm American, even in the village I grew up in. And I think it's because we don't hear our own accents on screen in any believable way very often.
Mm-hmm.
And when it is, it's either paddywhackery in that it's Americans or British people trying an accent, or it's Irish people being told to play up one. And it's actually not how like a lot of people actually speak. And like I've heard people say in the southern states in America complain about how they don't all talk like Foghorn Leghorn, but some but sometimes certain things evolve on camera, and it's not that they're good, but they just work. And similarly,
Mm-hmm.
I think when people speak with authentic Irish accents on screen, it's a bit
Mm-hmm.
like when people speak with New Zealand accents, you're kind of like, oh boy, what is this? This is really weird. Like, what?
What's going
Um,
on?
yeah. You're just like, and I don't know if I mean, it's definitely lack of experience. I don't think it's like this, it's not like it's this thing where it's like, oh, some accents just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
But it is sort of a bit, it does instill an uncanny feeling. And it's kind of like, we're just making one movie. It's not our
Mm-hmm.
job to like completely reassess the way people view an
Mm-hmm.
entire culture is accent on screen. So I think that's why a lot of times people just tend to pick something. But yeah, I think Veronica's accent is pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, so I never, as the critic, I never care about accents that much. I'm
Mhm.
like, as long as the emotional truth of the character is there. And I
Yeah.
always find it lazy when, like, you read a review of a movie and the critic only would mention the accent is the only thing he or she mentions about the performance.
Mhm.
And you're like, if you didn't know where this actor was born, you wouldn't even notice this accent that
Exactly.
you made a whole paragraph about.
I
Um,
mean, and that's I guess like a case to because again, this can easily mutate into quite ugly stereotyping and stuff. But
mhm,
I think when certain broad stock accents evolve through a long decades, centuries of dramatic performances, it is just because they need a shorthand to be like, this person's from this place. It's like
yeah.
we don't have time to do 6 months of research for the specific thing that probably no one's going to appreciate and they'll just say you sound weird. Um, and it's like like it's give or take. Like obviously there's the racist end of it, which is not okay. But then
Yeah.
there's like not everyone in Britain who is working class is a Cockney.
Yeah, totally. So just to make this sort of subject fun, because people do like to talk about accents.
Yeah.
The queen of accents, we know her, is of course Meryl Streep.
Mhm.
We can't sort of compare American accents because Meryl is American and Kate is not. But I always thought her American accents were amazing, very
Mhm.
specific, sort of like American accents. Like when she played Blue Jasmine, it was the very specific New York socialite accent.
I
When she
feel like
does,
what I was say, I feel like what she does is she actually finds examples of people and mimics them,
Mhm,
which is what Meryl Streep does as well. Like she
yep.
doesn't just go how to do this. Like she'll do, and again, that's why I said the Veronica Guerin. She's doing Veronica Guerin. Like that's what she's doing.
She must have listened to tapes or something of
Yeah,
Veronica
yeah.
Guerin, and that's how she got it. But just for fun, so Meryl,
Mhm.
the Queen of Accent, has done Irish in a
Mhm.
movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but I
I
have
have
seen it. Dancing at Lunasa.
good pronunciation. Genuinely, that wasn't a
Well, I just sort of went and watched the trailer for it again just to make sure.
okay.
That's why it came out well. So, Kate or Meryl? Kate in Veronica or Meryl in Dancing at Lunasa?
I think it's Meryl because my mother's family are literally from the area where Dancing at Luna is set, and it's like this is the thing where like it's so regional and specific in a way that is never shown on screen. So the fact that Meryl can do that really well kind of gives her bonus points. Whereas Cate is, like I said, she's kind of doing like not an SNL impression, but she's doing an impression of someone who has a lot of footage about them, which is easier, I would say.
Yes. And so Cate played an Italian in Heaven, a movie that we talked about. And in that movie, she actually speaks Italian. I don't speak Italian, so I don't know. But when I released the episode where I discussed Heaven with Kyle Stevens, I heard from and we talked about the accent a little bit, and I sort of posed the question, if there are any listeners in Italy, tell us, is her Italian authentic? Because sometimes when I hear somebody speak Arabic in a film, I'm always like, oh, they just learned this phonetic. This doesn't make any sense. Somebody just told them these are the sounds you need to make. Like Isabelle Huppert just made a movie last year, amazing actress, but her Arabic was atrocious. I did not know one word she was saying. Obviously, somebody just told her make these sounds. But that one of my listeners sort of came back from Italy, came back to me and said that Cate was amazing in Heaven, and her Italian was really spot on. And so Meryl famously, of course, played an Italian in The Bridges of Madison County from 1995. Wonderful film directed by Clint Eastwood, one of my favorite Meryl performances, and her accent is amazing. So who, Cate or Meryl?
I'm thinking a lot about Gaga.
In House of Gucci.
Exactly. No, I'm getting there. And the discourse around it. And I've heard Italian people say that, like, while the English bits where she is kind of doing a Patrizia are a bit ludicrous, and it is a bit like, I make the pasta for you.
Yeah.
The bits I've heard Italians say, like, when she speaks in Italian, it's actually pretty good.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that Italian, in like as in speaking Italian, it's not that hard. You don't have to do like a whole lot of accent, like the way, like the fact that it more or less like reads how it is written. Like there's not a lot of like trickery in the pronunciation stuff. And I think that most Italians don't have like a lot of heavy accenting in the way there's a lot of loudness, there's a lot of quickness, but it's not like that hard to do per se. Which I guess I had a really hard time trying to pick this one, because I was like, I actually kind of was like, I think they're both equal in different reasons.
They're both great.
Yeah, they're both great. I would say that I think that Meryl is doing a much tougher one, because she's supposed to be doing 40, 50 something year old housewife who's been living in Iowa for 20 years or something. So it's kind of like, it's got to be like sanded down a bit and have some weird so I'm going to go with Meryl just because there's a bit more going on.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to go with Cate just because, my wonderful listener said that she was wonderful in her Italian.
Yeah.
And so let's do one final one. So I in doing my research about this, so Cate famously actually played Plenty. She did Plenty on stage in London right after Elizabeth, so maybe in 1999, 2000. And that would have been 15 years after the movie came out, where Meryl played the same part. Yeah. And so, but we can't really compare them as the same character, because neither of us have seen Cate do Plenty in London. Yeah. I don't think. And so I chose Notes on a Scandal because Cate sort of plays a posh British woman from London. And doing my research about this, I found this profile of Cate in the New Yorker at the time when Notes on a Scandal came out. And sort of Richard Eyre, who directed Notes on a Scandal, talks about how he got to a sticky start with Cate because he wanted to talk to her about the accent and how she needs to be class specific and play and do a good accent that's very class specific. And she sort of just wanted to talk about the psychology of the character. And she's like, the accent, doesn't matter. It's not something to talk about. I just need to work at it. So let's just talk about the psychology. And so he says like he got to the sticky start with her. But of course, when she came on set, even though she didn't want to talk to him at all about the accent was spot on perfection. Yeah. So Cate or Meryl, Plenty versus Notes on a Scandal.
Oh, well, it's definitely not a scandal because I tried watching Plenty, the Meryl movie, and I couldn't stand it. And the accent felt, I don't know, it was just, you know, the way you read like contemporary criticism of Meryl in the 80s and how
Yeah.
people hated her and called her like cold and bloodless, but like the movies that have sort of stuck in the imagination, basically the ones she got Oscar nominations for, aren't all like that. But like when I watched Plenty, I was like going, oh, I get it. This character, and the accent is very general posh. Like it's just, I'm English, and it's just not very good. It is good. It sounds sort of, but it feels very like drama school.
Yeah.
But with Kate's one, and thinking about but what both she and Richard said about it, that like, because with that character, it is the psychology. I think it might not be, because I think Sheba's supposed to be a bit stupid, isn't she? She's supposed to be kind of.
I think it's the only time Kate has played dumb on screen, but it's a scandal.
Yeah, like the character's not supposed to be very smart, and so in many ways, I think the accent's very important, and she nails this very specific, like very middle class Islington yummy mummy, which is like what all these people are, and these people exist, and they sound like her exactly in it. Like they sound like she sounds like Rosamund Pike in some of her movies. Like it's just this particular kind of like, oh, you're posh, but you're really stupid, but the accent's telling me you're not.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more going on there. This feels like a specific character, whereas Meryl's character in Plenty feels a lot, and the accent feels more general.
Yeah. So I think Meryl and Kate are tied. They're both amazing, which is what we want out of this podcast for all the wonderful actresses to be. We don't
need to pit women against each other.
Exactly. We want to acknowledge all of them and their wonderful work. I actually was hoping Kate has done a Polish accent, because of course Meryl's best accent is Sophie's Choice, where it's amazing, but she hasn't. So Kate, if you're listening, find a Polish role.
She did Russian in The Man Who Cried.
Yes.
I think that's the closest she gets to Poland.
Yeah, that's the closest. But it's not the same. And no. I loved her. I also talked to Nathaniel Rogers about The Man Who Cried, and I loved that performance. But not because of the accent. I think she's doing a very sort of theatrical, big performance where everybody around her is very subdued. And so she shines and kind of steals the movie. It's like a classic scene stealer in The Man Who Cried.
But I think it works really well because, everyone else in there, like Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, like even not only their characters, but just as performers, they're all famous for being fairly subdued.
Yeah.
And I think that, it is a fun, it's not unlike The Talented Mr. Ripley. Like, it's just that kind of like, oh, you're a little hurricane. You're fun. Yeah. You're a lot.
Yeah. You're coming in for not a lot, but you're a lot when you're on, which is amazing. I think Kate really shines in those sort of parts.
That's my definition of what a really good supporting performance should be, specifically like an Oscar-winning supporting one, because when they're on screen, you should be like, oh, I love them. I want to watch their movie. And they should be the center of the world. And then when they're gone, the movie should still work.
Yes. Which is kind of what she did in The Aviator, which is a year after Veronica Guerin. Like, she comes in, she's doing Katharine Hepburn, she's doing the accent, she's got the freckles, she's got the costumes, everything, and you can't not watch her, especially in that first scene where they're playing golf, and she's just a real hurricane. She's just coming in and doesn't stop talking, and you're like, what is going on? But I think with The Aviator, because the movie's so long, I think I missed her. I was like, can we bring her back?
No, I did. I did too. I was like, can you come back just for like one little scene, like maybe at the end? Because you are sort of thinking she was great, and like I think everyone in that is good. Like I genuinely like Kate Beckinsale. I think she's never gotten parts that she deserved, but she's fabulous in it. As
she looks the part. Like she definitely looks like Ava Gardner.
She looks the part, but I also enjoy the fact that like the tone she's delivering it is like, so like she's utterly unfazed by anything Howard does, so she's just like oh yes, in a way that like I don't think Kate would be, because Kate's a lot more engaged, and with it's like, and it's like that, even that was fun. But like I always love that scene when Faith Domergue crashes her car into the side of their car, and like she's screaming, "Get that crazy bitch away from me!" So good.
Now I just want to go watch all her scenes as Katharine Hepburn again. I love that performance so much. I know when she won the Oscar, it sort of was not, people maybe loved Virginia Madsen a little bit more that year. And so it wasn't like a loved win, but I've always loved it. And I thought that it was a deserved win, even though, Virginia Madsen also is deserving. But and Cate talked about that, and she said something like, which I think to what you were saying earlier about Veronica Guerin being geared toward Oscar. She's like, maybe now everybody I work with will relax and stop releasing every movie I make in December. So that was like her take about winning the Oscar for.
And that's very true. I think that's absolutely because she's so, in the late 90s, like she's such a Miramax-esque actress. Like she's like Nicole Kidman, Renee Zellweger, like just one of these people who like are in these like adult dramas that like do well at awards maybe, and
also it was felt like she was leading the conversation for Best Actress the year of Elizabeth, and then Gwyneth Paltrow came from behind and sort of won with a late release, and so there was a lot of sentiment like Cate Blanchett should be an Oscar winner, and so basically all these movies that she made in that era, things like Charlotte Gray and Veronica Guerin and all of these movies, they were all, like she said, released in December, hoping to be that movie that wins Cate Blanchett the Oscar. And so after The Aviator, she's like, everybody I work with, relax now, don't release the movies in December.
Yeah. And to be fair, I feel neither of her Oscar wins are necessarily for movies that didn't deserve it, which can so often happen in these scenarios when they get the idea that someone deserves one, right? It can be for, although I don't personally mind what someone wins for, but it is nice when it's for like, oh no, that was
Blue Jasmine definitely much more than The Aviator. Like that was the performance everybody was talking about that year. And also it came out really early. So every movie that came out and was a leading actress performance was sort of measured against her, and everybody was like, no, it's still Cate. So
I mean, I think she fully stole that picture as well. Like she did her own costuming for it, which is like for that character is so essential. But even like I'm convinced that originally I think it changed in editing, because I think that originally it was probably supposed to be like a reversal of fortune thing between the two sisters, and Sally Hawkins was meant to have a bit more screen time, like because that whole subplot with her romance with Louis C.K., like all this stuff is
unnecessary.
Just feels extraneous, and I feel that Cate just came in with so much that they're like, okay, I think this needs to be the movie, and we're doing Streetcar.
I love Blue Jasmine. I think it's probably my favorite of her performances. It's, even though like I like Cate in this mode where she's unraveling. Like she's dealing with a lot of emotions and unraveling. And she does that a lot, and sometimes a little bit reserved. But in Blue Jasmine, she just let the gushers out. Like she let it all out.
Like, I mean, we know the memes that are popular. The fact that like the gifts that are popular, like, the one of just her like crying and drinking wine at the restaurant. It's like, that's just such a potent moment, and to be able to convey it so well.
Yeah. Or I saw you, Erica, which I do say in real life.
Like, and again, just there's so many lines, there's so many good deliveries, there's so many good gestures. It's like she's on all cylinders in that movie, and as a win, it's entirely deserved. I can't recall who she was up against that year.
Sandra Bullock in Gravity, Meryl in August Osage County,
Amy Adams in American Hustle, and
Judi Dench in Philomena, which I love Dame Judi. She's amazing.
And like ironically, Philomena is a great portrayal of like Irishness on screen. Like she is literally my grandmother. Like I know who that person is. Or not, my grandmother wasn't a Magdalene laundry survivor, but she acts in the same way, and there's just like lots of like notes and things. And I think that it was tough because it's like, Cate, I see how she wins. I fully understand it. I kind of wanted Judy to win for a lot of personal reasons, but it's sort of like, it's kind of like, two equal, either outcome is fine.
Yeah. Yes. I love Dame Judy and Philomena. I think I remember seeing that movie and just like, I was awash in tears. I cry a lot at movies, but that was just a little bit more tears than usual, even for me.
And that's even considering it's doing something which could so easily just be mawkish sentimentality, like it could easily be quite bad.
Yeah.
And I think more so her performance really just, there's a lot of heart in it in a way that I think you could easily just not have put in, and it would just be a lot more, sentimental.
Yeah. I'm glad we got to talk about all these movies, Dash. But so with Veronica Guerin, I wanted to play a little game with you, Dash. So with Veronica Guerin, Cate Blanchett is very famous for always playing the titular role. Like she has a lot of movies where The title of the movie is the name of her character.
It's like the Joan Crawford special, yeah.
Yes. So I have 5, and I'm going to do like sort of a simplistic description of the plot.
Okay.
And see if you can guess which
Okay,
movie. So the movies will have the character in the title, and there are only 5. I'll start with a very easy one. A forgetful New Jersey housewife who misplaces her gloves in a department store.
Carol Aird.
That's Carol. Next, we have a teenage girl who takes over her sister's job and grows up by banishing her boyfriend after he betrays her.
I don't know, but I want to say one of them is going to be Charlotte Gray. Is it Charlotte Gray?
No. Do you want to take another guess?
Okay.
So she starts as a teenage girl. Her sister's basically has a big job. She takes over that job. Then she has a boyfriend. He betrays her. Then she banishes him at the end of the film.
It's not Oscar and Lucinda, is it?
No. All right. This is Elizabeth, because Mary was queen. Then Elizabeth becomes queen. That's the job. And then there's, the Joseph Fiennes. She banishes him.
You're right. I was thinking so literally. I'm sorry. It's obvious now. Yes.
Yeah. So this next one should be easy. A Xanax-loving socialite unraveling.
Of course. Charlotte Gray. No, Blue Jasmine.
That's Blue Jasmine, yes. And so I have another unraveling woman who, this is like my mode with Cate that I love. This unraveling woman is in a feud with her very nosy neighbor. This is a later Cate film, just from the last few years.
Okay. I don't know.
This is Where'd You Go, Bernadette? The Richard Linklater film.
Oh, no, I wouldn't have guessed that one.
Yeah, and the nosy neighbor is played by Kristen Wiig. So.
Is it any good?
It's fine. It's not great.
I mean, like, I know it's a novel and it feels very like this was a book club hit. Let's make a movie. The movie's bound to be a hit. Like, it feels a bit like that, right?
Yeah. But I think that the adaptation sort of like, I don't think Richard Linklater was the right person to do it, because he was interested in other things, which makes the movie interesting in its own way, but not in what makes the book great. Like, the book was a satire about Seattle, sort of tech people and whatever, and that was not at all what he was interested in.
I didn't know it was about that at all. I assumed it was like a Desperate Housewives-esque, like, suburban.
It kind of is, but it's set in the sort of the Seattle milieu. Like, they all work in tech, like at Google, and Google-like places and things like that.
Okay.
And he was more interested in sort of like the story of a woman who was so bright and successful at the beginning of her career, and then sort of suffered this major, where everything she sort of built was taken away from her. And so she suffered psychologically. And so he was interested in that story, which is a completely different story, interesting in its own, but not what the book is about, really. So I think there was just a disconnect. But we have talked about that on. So if you want to listen to that episode, it's out there.
I am intrigued.
And I have one last one for you, Dash. This is the first one. And this is very simplistic. So think of one of the other clues that we talked about. So this one is about a boss who matches her employee or subordinate with the man she wants to fuck.
Wait, this is Elizabeth the Golden Age, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Because Elizabeth does want to fuck. What is Clive Owen's character's name? I don't remember.
Lord Sir Walter. I think it's Walter Raleigh.
Walter Raleigh, yes. And then the other Australian actress whose name is completely escaping me right now, who was in the Jane Campion movie Bright Star, does play
Abby Cornish.
Abby Cornish plays her lady in waiting, and she's sort of like, go talk to him. So yeah, so that's Elizabeth the Golden Age.
That movie's unhinged. Like, it's so camp and draggy. Like,
yeah, it is. But it is sort of like, to me, it's the most fun Cate movie to watch in installments. Like, you can just go watch scenes and just be amazed at the campiness and about the theatricality of the performance.
That's what The Life of Elizabeth I is like. It's why they like adapting it to so many like episodes. But yeah, like, you're right. Just it's so rich.
Yes. So thank you for playing
awesome.
titular roles, Dash.
What? How did I score? Did I get three out of them right? Two, three of them right?
You know what? I wasn't keeping count, but I think you got 3 out of 5, which is pretty good.
Okay.
You pass.
Okay, cool. Phew.
So before we go, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions about Cate. We've talked about a lot of her performances already, but I wanted to know, just if you were to name one favorite Blanchett performance, which one would it be?
It probably is The Aviator, and it's not just necessarily her performance, it's the setting. Like, old Hollywood stuff. It's my obsession. I love Hepburn as well. And I think not so much a Cate thing, but a Scorsese thing, is that he understands he's got special interest in these things in this period, but he manages to do it in an accessible way. So like, this was the first time as a kid I'd ever seen anything to do with Katharine Hepburn in any way. And it definitely is a good pot history. And the fact that Cate gets to deconstruct the Hepburn persona even in the movie, I think that is what makes it a really good performance. The fact that she starts off all bluster in a hurricane, doing everything you think of when you think Katharine Hepburn, and then it gradually just falls away. And like, it's summed up in that line when she says, there's only one Cate, and it's your Cate.
But
that's the one I would go for.
Yeah, good choice. I love it too. So Cate has 2 movies out now in release, Nightmare Alley and Don't Look Up. Have you seen either or both?
I've not, but I am going to have to see both of them for award season, right?
Yes.
I'm excited to see her in Don't Look Up.
Yes, Don't Look Up. It's a small dose of Cate in Don't Look Up, but it's a fun dose. It's my favorite part of the movie is her and Leo. And if you're a fan of The Aviator, all her scenes are with Leo, so it's great. It's a great reunion for them. She's very funny in it. And she just got a surprise SAG nomination for Nightmare Alley, which congratulations, Cate Blanchett. Another award nomination. She's really good. She's the best thing in Nightmare Alley. Nightmare Alley is a movie that sort of, the reception to it has been a little subdued, and it came out at a time when people are not going to the movie, so nobody went to see it. But I actually loved it and enjoyed it. And it's very dark and completely different sort of register for Guillermo del Toro. Also, Cate is playing something she has done before, although not explicitly. She's explicitly a femme fatale here, but it's another sort of like glamorous role, a woman from the 40s. We've seen her in that mode before.
Which is a valid criticism.
Yeah. But she is absolutely great. And her sparring, we talked about her sparring with Kieran Hines here, and she spars with Bradley Cooper. Her scenes with him are fire in that film. So.
And he's genuinely, I quite like him a lot. I think he's generally a pretty good co-star with almost anyone. Like, he works really well with co-stars, I think. But yeah, like my feeling, the reading I'd gotten of Nightmare Alley was that it's definitely, I think a lot of people are unfairly doing it's like, oh, it's your follow-up to your Oscar-winning movie, which isn't fair. Even though I think it feels like Guillermo and also almost everyone involved in it is like this is a one for me movie. Yeah,
totally. And this is completely like, I think this is it's an expensive film, and he did it with the studio that won the Oscar with The Shape of Water, and they gave him more money, and he made this very dark film that is, I found it sometimes hard to be in it. And if I wasn't at a screening, I maybe would have, if I was at home, I would have turned it off a little bit just to sort of relax, because it's relentless in its darkness. And so I think he as a movie to do right after your biggest success, he is cashing his cards, and he did it very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, he has fans that will see whatever he wants to make, so yeah, use the opportunity to do your a vanity project is a mean phrase, but your pet project. There we go.
Yeah. So I'll end with one question. This is a podcast about Cate Blanchett, but it's mostly a podcast about actresses I love. And I've done special episodes about Carey Mulligan, about Judi Dench. So I want to ask you a non-Cate question. So this year, which actress has impressed you the most?
A lot of them, for different reasons. But I would say I actually think, and I'm half joking, but I'm also half serious. I think Gaga has really impressed me because while House of Gucci is a deranged film,
totally,
it's because of her star power that it's been a reasonable financial success. People are actually watching it, and people are talking about it, and people are talking about her press for it.
Yes.
And like she's made it a moment in a way that, you know, we've seen all these articles about how West Side Story was a disappointment, Nightmare Alley was a disappointment, just like Last Jewel was a disappointment after disappointment, like
but not Gucci.
Exactly. And like again, it is not a good film, but it's certainly enjoyable. And even in watching her in scenes, she's not, I won't so much say acting, but she's performing so much. Like every opportunity to do a gesture, she's doing it. And I think that genuinely is impressive. Like
yes,
everyone always wants to be dismissive of her as an actress, and like for certain, like she's not Meryl Streep, but she's so committed whenever she is doing stuff. And
she's very watchable. You can't take your eyes off her. This was my experience with Gucci. I also love Gaga so much in House of Gucci, and I think it's a great performance. Not, you know, in that she's so watchable and interesting, and everything she does is bigger. And there is. I wrote about Gaga's performance for Into. I'll link to that. And I love this performance. And I think she would make also a great Oscar winner because the film is about her. And then she gave us this press tour where she is nakedly giving us so many moments from like, you know, Patricia Send Me Flies to like, you know, I drink the prop water and get drunk on it. So many amazing moments. And she's in a bona fide box office hit in a year where there were not that many. So she's a star, and this is a moment that maybe she should be rewarded with the Best Actress Oscar.
And you're very right, like because these organizations like the Oscars, like all of them, BAFTA, like more than anything else, like these things are fundamentally shows, and they need people to turn up, and they need people to turn up to and make people watch it. And when Gaga turns up, people watch stuff. You know, like she creates moments on red carpets at every opportunity. She's doing something. She's good for viewers, and these organizations like that, and like no one wants to admit it, but like that's also a key facet of it. You know, you have to do the red carpet, you have to like do the statements, you know, where it's like, oh, it's wonderful to be here, and like and say all the one, you know, you've got to do that, and she does it, and she doesn't have to. She has a successful pop career, like of everyone here. She doesn't like need this. But she definitely should be applauded for it.
Yeah, she's absolutely amazing. My theory about Gaga's performance in House of Gucci is that there is a mention in the script early on about how Patricia looks like Elizabeth Taylor. And I think Gaga read that note in the script and went and watched all of Elizabeth Taylor's movies and decided to give an Elizabeth Taylor performance. And she does.
That's very, very true. Like, even when I was watching, I was kind of like, there's a lot of like just Lizisms, but like it just, I feel like I'm watching Boom. Like it gets a bit wacky. But yeah, like also on the list, I just want to say I put like Jessica Chastain in Eyes Tammy Faye and Kristen Stewart and Spencer, which I know are these like the easy choices. I think Stewart, particularly in Spencer, because she took a figure, Diana, who is, especially in Britain, so she's when a cultural figure becomes so big, like Marilyn Monroe or Churchill or God, even Hitler or someone, like they mean everyone knows how they feel about them. Everyone feels many different ways about them. And as a result, it's very difficult to like add something to it, you know? And I think, or just to do anything. And what's especially interesting is like, given that the way the royals are portrayed on screen, it's often very prescribed. It's basically like The Crown, you know, it's like we're in an austere room. We don't really emote. The acting's great apparently, but you know, who knows? I think she found a way to make Diana just like interesting and weird and compelling.
I want to say that I agree with you about Jessica Chastain, and I think that movie sort of came and went and people didn't watch it. But if you watch that performance, I think I was so surprised by how audacious and bold she is as Tammy Faye. And it's another one of those like really Tammy Faye herself was so performative that you have to perform Tammy, similar to what Kate did as Katharine Hepburn. You have to perform Katharine Hepburn. And so Chastain had to perform Tammy Faye, but also I think she found other notes to play. Like I think her performance is full of heart. And it's one of those sort of like, she just invites you in to love this character, which is not an easy thing to do with such a sort of controversial character that many people have, you know, already established ideas about.
Like, I think that it's worth pointing out, like, and I ended up researching this, but like, there's the two actors who have won the most number of awards without winning an Oscar are Isabelle Huppert and Jessica Chastain. Like they've won tons of awards, and they're the highest. And it's like, so if we're going to talk about, like, say, people who deserve one or should have one, I'd argue Hugh Perry doesn't really like this. She doesn't really like have a Hollywood career, like even though like she probably should have one, but like not likely. Whereas Chastain like is a Hollywood actor, and like she is so accomplished, and yet they sort of keep sleeping on her. And I think that she's so committed in Tammy Faye to the character, and it just I feel Chastain has like this inherent warmth in her characters often, and she manages to convey that in all the Tammy Faye bits, which is just so important for that character.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an impressive statistics there, because her career is just a little bit over a decade. Like, I think the
2011 was her breakout year.
2011. Yeah. That's
like
11 years ago.
Exactly. And like I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I just know that they're like the top two. And I think the next person is like Willem Dafoe or someone. And it's so like Willem Dafoe and Isabelle Huppert have a lot more in common in terms of the length of their careers than Chastain does. Yeah.
Wow. Jessica Chastain. I'm glad we managed to talk about the actresses in this year's awards race, which Cate is in, but a little bit peripheral because Nightmare Alley is not as beloved as your movie need to be for you to actually be a real contender. But I think she'll be back soon because she's working with Alfonso Cuarón, with Pedro Almodovar, with Todd Field. She's like racking up the directors for the next few years.
Yeah. Like, and that's an impressive like stable of directors.
Yes, absolutely. Dash, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on Sundays with Cate and talking with me. I enjoyed it so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
And before we go, please let our listeners know where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dashel Silva, DASHIELL SILVA.
Yes. Give Dash a follow. You will not regret it, especially if you are listening here. You must love actresses, and Dash will give you lots of actresses content on Twitter.
Unending.
And I just sort of a programming note. I am going to Sundance. I'm not flying to Park City, but I'm going to be watching lots of Sundance movies for the next week and a half. On my laptop at home in New York, but it means that Sundays with Cate will take a break for 1 week. So there will not be an episode next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks to finish this last season of the podcast and finish a few movies that we haven't talked about yet. And until then, thank you for listening. And you can find me on Twitter at ME_Saz and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Sundays with Cate.